They say love is a battlefield, but for Amelia it was a gilded cage. She was Mrs. Sterling, wife to the city's most formidable billionaire, a man who controlled empires with a flick of his wrist. But when his mistress demanded an apology and her husband forced her pregnant and fragile onto a stage in front of the world's elite, the gilded cage shattered. What she did next wasn't just a moment of defiance. It was an act of war that would bring an empire to its knees and leave everyone utterly speechless. This is the story of how a whispered apology became a deafening roar of rebellion. The air in the penthouse suite, a sprawling expanse of glass and marble overlooking Central Park, was thick with a silence that felt heavier than any shouted words. Amelia Sterling, her hand resting protectively on the slight curve of her 5-month-old baby bump, stared at the man she had once vowed to love, honor, and cherish. Today, all she felt was a chilling cocktail of disbelief and a slow, simmering rage. Across from her, lounging on a custom-made Roche-Beaubois sofa with the predatory grace of a panther, was Isabella Rossi. Her raven hair was a stark, almost violent slash against the pristine white leather. Her crimson dress, a sliver of silk that seemed to defy gravity, clung to her every curve. She was everything Amelia was not: bold, brazen, and utterly without shame. And she was the woman her husband was sleeping with. "It's a simple request," Amelia said. "Liam Sterling." His voice, usually a warm baritone that could charm investors and disarm rivals, now clipped and devoid of any warmth. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his imposing figure silhouetted against the glittering tapestry of the Manhattan skyline. At 42, Liam Sterling wasn't just a man, he was an institution. Sterling Industries, his brainchild, had its tentacles in everything from tech to real estate, making him one of the most powerful men in the world. His face a chiseled masterpiece that had graced the cover of Forbes more times than Amelia could count, was currently a mask of cold impatience. A simple request. Amelia's voice was a whisper, a fragile sound in the cavernous room. "You want me to apologize to her?" She didn't grace Isabella with a name. To do so would be to acknowledge her existence in a way that felt like swallowing shards of glass. Isabella stretched a languid, deliberate movement designed to draw the eye. A smug smile played on her perfectly painted lips. "He does," she purred, her voice a low, throaty sound that grated on Amelia's raw nerves. "And frankly, I think it's the least you can do." Amelia's gaze snapped to her. "The least I can do." "For what? For discovering my husband in bed with you? For the public humiliation? For the fact that you seem to have no qualms about trying to destroy a marriage while I am carrying his child?" "Don't be so dramatic, darling," Isabella said, waving a dismissive hand, the massive diamond on her finger. A gift from Liam. Amelia knew, with a fresh wave of nausea catching the light. It was a misunderstanding. You weren't supposed to be home. A bitter laugh escaped Amelia's lips. A misunderstanding? Of course. How silly of me to assume I had the right to be in my own home. Enough. Liam's voice cut through the air like a whip. He turned from the window, his grey eyes, usually so full of life and affection, when they looked at her now, as cold and hard as the granite countertops in the kitchen. "This is not a debate, Amelia. Isabella's reputation has been unfairly tarnished by your outburst." His choice of words was a deliberate blow. Her outburst had been a choked sob, a stumbling retreat from the master bedroom, where she had found them entangled in their marital bed. She hadn't screamed, hadn't thrown things, hadn't caused a scene. She had simply shattered quietly and completely. Her reputation. Amelia's voice trembled with a fury that was starting to eclipse the pain. What about my dignity? What about our marriage? What about our child? This is about business. Amelia, Liam said, his tone shifting to one of condescending explanation, as if he were schooling a recalcitrant child. Isabella's father, Lorenzo Rossi, is a key investor in the new Jakarta project. His support is crucial. This situation has made him hesitant. And there it was. The cold, hard truth laid bare in the soulless language of a business transaction. Her pain, her humiliation, her pregnancy, it was all just an inconvenient variable in a multi-billion-dollar equation. So to appease Lorenzo Rossi, you need your pregnant wife to publicly humiliate herself for the sake of your mistress. Amelia summarized the words, tasting like poison in her mouth. I need you to be a supportive wife, Liam corrected her, his jaw tight. I need you to understand the bigger picture. This is for our family. The success of this project will secure our future. Our child's future. Our child's future is secured by having a father with a moral compass, Liam. Not by another billion in the bank, she retorted, her voice gaining strength. Isabella stood up, then gliding over to Liam's side, her hand possessively sliding up his chest. She looked at Amelia with a mixture of pity and triumph. He's right, you know. You're being emotional. It's the hormones, I suppose. The condescension was suffocating. Amelia felt a wave of dizziness. The stress of the past few weeks, the sleepless nights, the constant gnawing anxiety, all culminating in this one unbearable moment. I will not do it, Amelia said, her voice low but firm. I will not stand up in front of anyone and apologize for your affair. Liam's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. You will? He said, his voice dangerously soft. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala is in 2 days. It's the perfect venue. The press will be there. Our most important partners will be there. You will get up on that stage, and you will make a statement. You will say that you overreacted, that you misunderstood the situation, and that you would like to personally apologize to Isabella for the distress you have caused her. And if I refuse, Amelia challenged her heart, hammering against her ribs. Liam took a step towards her, his presence filling the room, sucking all the air out of it. Then you will leave me no choice. I will cut you off, Amelia. No more access to the accounts, no more staff, no more penthouse. You will be left with nothing, and I will file for sole custody of the child, citing your emotional instability. The threat hung in the air, a venomous promise. He would do it. She knew he would. He had the power, the resources, the ruthlessness. He could paint her as an unhinged, hysterical pregnant woman, and the world, so easily swayed by the narrative of a powerful man, would believe him. She looked at his face, searching for a flicker of the man she had married, the man who had once quoted poetry to her under the stars in Tuscany, the man who had held her and wept with joy when she told him she was pregnant. But that man was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating stranger. Isabella, ever the victor, sealed the moment with a final triumphant smile. It's for the best, Amelia. Think of the baby. Amelia stood frozen as they left, their laughter echoing in the hallway, a cruel and mocking sound. The weight of her situation crashed down on her. She was trapped a pawn in a game she never asked to play. The stage was set. The audience was waiting, and she was being forced to deliver a performance that would not only be a public declaration of her own humiliation, but a betrayal of her very soul. As the penthouse door clicked shut, leaving her in the suffocating silence once more, a single tear traced a path down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of rage. And in that moment, a seed of rebellion, small and fragile, began to take root in the barren landscape of her heart. She had 2 days. 2 days to decide whether to surrender or to fight back in a way that no one, least of all Liam Sterling, would ever see coming. The 2 days that followed were a blur of suffocating despair and feverish planning. The penthouse, once a symbol of her fairy tale life, now felt like a prison of polished chrome and cold glass. The city lights that had once seemed so magical now mocked her with their indifferent sparkle. Liam was a ghost in their home, appearing only to remind her of her duty. His voice a chillingly polite monotone that made her skin crawl. He had already informed his PR team to expect a special announcement at the gala, and the buzz was already starting to build in the city's gossip columns. Sources say Amelia Sterling will address the recent rumors of marital strife. One headline read, and Amelia felt a fresh wave of nausea. She spent hours staring at her reflection at the woman with haunted eyes and a belly that held the future. The baby would kick a gentle, insistent flutter, and Amelia would whisper, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I got us into this mess." She felt like a failure, not just as a wife, but as a mother. What kind of mother would allow her child to be born into a world of such cold, calculated cruelty? On the first day, she considered running. She had a small private trust fund left to her by her grandmother, enough to disappear to start a new life somewhere quiet and unassuming. But Liam's threat about custody echoed in her mind. He would hunt her down. He had the resources of a small nation at his disposal. He would use every dirty trick in the book to paint her as an unfit mother, and he would win. The thought of losing her child, of her baby, being raised by Liam and that venomous woman, was a pain far sharper than any public humiliation. That night, as she lay alone in the guest room, the master bedroom now a desecrated space she couldn't bear to enter, an idea began to form a desperate, audacious plan born from the ashes of her broken heart. It was a long shot, a gamble of epic proportions, but it was the only move she had left. The next morning, she did something she hadn't done in years. She took a yellow cab, dressed in a simple maternity dress and a pair of oversized sunglasses. She was just another anonymous face in the bustling city. She directed the driver to a part of Brooklyn she hadn't visited since before her marriage, a neighborhood of brownstones and tree-lined streets that felt a world away from the sterile opulence of her life with Liam. Her destination was a small, unassuming law office with a faded sign that read, "Julian Croft, Attorney at Law." Julian Croft was a relic from her past, a brilliant but notoriously unconventional lawyer she had known in college. He was the kind of man who championed the underdog, who took on cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. He was also the only person she knew who was smart enough and perhaps crazy enough to go up against Liam Sterling. Julian's office was a chaotic symphony of overflowing bookshelves, teetering stacks of legal briefs, and the faint smell of old paper and strong coffee. He looked up as she entered, his brow furrowed in concentration over a thick legal text. He was older now, his dark hair streaked with grey, his face etched with the lines of 100 courtroom battles. But his eyes, when they met hers, were the same sharp, intelligent, and missing nothing. "Amelia Cartwright," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. He hadn't used her married name. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? She took off her sunglasses, and the smile faded from his face as he took in her pale, strained expression. "Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I need your help." She told him everything. The affair, the confrontation, the demand for a public apology, the threat of losing her child. She spared no detail, her voice cracking as she recounted the cold, dismissive way Liam had spoken to her, the triumphant smirk on Isabella's face. When she finished, the silence in the room was as heavy as the one in her penthouse. Julian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze fixed on her. "He wants you to apologize on the stage of the Sterling Foundation Gala," he finally said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. In front of everyone, Amelia confirmed, her heart pounding. "He wants to utterly and completely humiliate me." "And you?" Julian said, leaning forward, his eyes boring into hers. "What do you want?" "I want to fight back," she said, a spark of defiance in her voice. "But I don't know how. He holds all the cards. He has the money, the power, the influence. He has weaknesses," Julian said, a glint in his eye that Amelia hadn't seen in years. "Every empire has a crack in its foundation. We just need to find it." He stood up and began to pace the small office, his mind clearly working at a furious pace. "He's using Isabella's father, Lorenzo Rossi, as the justification for this performance," he mused, more to himself than to her. "The Jakarta Project. Sterling is expanding his empire into Southeast Asia. It's a massive undertaking, and he needs Rossi's capital." "But what does that have to do with me?" Amelia asked. Everything Julian said, stopping his pacing to look at her. "Liam is a master manipulator. He's not just doing this to appease Rossi. He's doing this to control you, to break you. But he's made a mistake. He's underestimated you." He walked over to a large whiteboard covered in scribbled notes and diagrams from other cases. He wiped a section clean and wrote, "Sterling Gala," in big, bold letters. "This is our stage," he said, a grim smile on his face. "He's given us the platform, the audience, the media. We're not going to refuse it. We're going to use it." For the next few hours they talked, they planned, they strategized. Julian, with his encyclopedic knowledge of corporate law and his uncanny ability to find leverage in the most unexpected places, began to formulate a counteroffensive. He made a series of discreet phone calls, his voice low and urgent, to contacts he had cultivated over years of legal battles, a forensic accountant, a private investigator, a journalist with a reputation for taking down powerful men. As Amelia watched him, a glimmer of hope, the first she had felt in weeks, began to flicker within her. She had come to Julian broken and desperate, and he was forging her despair into a weapon. The plan they were hatching was audacious, risky, and could still blow up in her face. But it was hers. It was a choice. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a surge of power, a sense of agency that had been stolen from her. When she left Julian's office late that afternoon, the city seemed different. The sun breaking through the clouds cast long shadows on the street, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Amelia felt like she was stepping out of the darkness and into the light. She had a long and difficult road ahead of her, and the gala was now less than 24 hours away. But she was no longer a victim. She was a woman with a plan. and as she hailed a cab to take her back to her gilded cage, a fierce, determined smile touched her lips. Liam Sterling wanted a show. She would give him a performance he would never forget. The day of the gala dawned with an almost cinematic perfection. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Amelia's heart. She went through the motions of the day in a daze, a strange sense of calm settling over her. It was the calm of a soldier before a battle, the quiet acceptance of a fate that was now hurtling towards her. Liam, ever the picture of suave indifference, had a custom-made gown delivered to her room. It was a stunning creation of midnight blue silk, a designer piece that would have once made her heart flutter. Today it felt like a costume for a tragic play. He had also sent a professional hair and makeup artist a clear message that her appearance on his stage was to be nothing short of flawless. As the stylist worked on her hair, curling it into soft, elegant waves, Amelia's mind raced. Julian's words from the day before echoed in her ears. "Confidence, Amelia. You are not a victim begging for scraps. You are the rightful Mrs. Sterling, the mother of his heir. You have more power than you think. You just need to learn how to wield it." Throughout the day, she received a series of cryptic text messages from Julian. The first, arriving at 10 a.m., simply said, "The package has been delivered." The second, at 2 p.m., read, "The fisherman is in the boat." And the third, just an hour before she was due to leave for the gala, was a single powerful word, checkmate. She didn't know the specifics of Julian's plan. He had told her it was better that way, that her reactions on stage needed to be genuine. All he had said was, "When you get on that stage, speak your truth. But first, let me set the stage for you." Liam entered her room as the makeup artist was applying the finishing touches. He was dressed in a tailored Tom Ford tuxedo, looking every inch the billionaire titan. He surveyed her with a critical eye. A flicker of something, was it appreciation or just satisfaction that his prized possession looked the part in his cold grey eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice a low murmur. It was a line he had delivered 1,000 times, but tonight it was stripped of all its former warmth and sincerity. It was a statement of fact, an observation on the quality of his investment. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. The ride to the museum, where the gala was being held, was silent. The air in the back of the Maybach was thick with unspoken words, a chasm of resentment and betrayal separating them. Amelia stared out at the city lights, her reflection a ghostly image in the tinted window. She saw not the frightened, broken woman of a few days ago, but a woman with a purpose, a woman on the precipice of a life-altering decision. The Sterling Foundation. Gala was the social event of the year. The red carpet was a frenzy of flashing cameras and fawning reporters. As Amelia stepped out of the car, a collective gasp went through the crowd. She was a vision of ethereal beauty, her pregnancy adding a soft, radiant glow to her features. But it was the look in her eyes that was different. There was a fire there, a steely resolve that no one had ever seen before. Liam, ever the master of public perception, placed a proprietary hand on the small of her back, guiding her down the red carpet. He smiled for the cameras, the perfect image of the doting husband. Amelia played her part, a serene, almost enigmatic smile on her lips. She could feel Isabella's eyes on her from somewhere in the crowd, a burning gaze of triumph and malice. Inside the grand hall of the museum had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, casting a warm golden light on the city's elite. The air was filled with the murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Amelia moved through the crowd like a queen in a court of her own making. People came up to her, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They offered her words of sympathy, their eyes darting nervously towards Liam. She accepted their condolences with a graceful nod, a quiet dignity that seemed to unnerve them. She saw Isabella across the room holding court with a group of fawning admirers. She was dressed in a scandalous red dress, a splash of garish colour in a sea of elegant black and white. She raised her champagne glass to Amelia in a silent, mocking toast. Amelia simply met her gaze, her expression unreadable. As dinner was winding down, Liam leaned over to her. "It's almost time," he whispered, his voice a cold caress against her ear. "Don't disappoint me." A few minutes later, the lights dimmed and a spotlight fell on the stage. Liam's trusted second-in-command, a man named Marcus Thorne, walked to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the hall. "Thank you all for being here tonight to support the Sterling Foundation. We have a very special evening planned for you. And now it is my great honor to introduce the man himself, the visionary behind Sterling Industries, Mr. Liam Sterling." The room erupted in applause as Liam made his way to the stage. He was in his element, a master showman, his charisma washing over the crowd. He spoke for a few minutes about the Foundation's work, about his vision for the future, about the importance of giving back. It was a masterful performance full of passion and humility. And then he turned to the real reason he was on that stage. On a more personal note, he said, his voice taking on a somber tone, "I know there have been some rumors circulating in the press recently, rumors that have caused a great deal of distress to my family. And tonight my wife Amelia would like to say a few words to address them." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to Amelia as she stood up from her table. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, 100 judgments being formed. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return. As she walked towards the stage, her midnight blue dress flowing behind her, she felt a strange sense of power. She was no longer a pawn in Liam's game. She was the queen, and she was about to make her move. She glanced at Liam, who gave her a curt, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. She reached the podium, the bright spotlight blinding her for a moment. She looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of wealth and power. She saw Isabella in the front row, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. And in that moment, all her fear, all her doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. She was ready. Amelia stood at the podium, the warmth of the spotlight, a stark contrast to the ice in her veins. She let the silence stretch a deliberate, calculated pause that drew every eye in the room to her. She could feel the weight of their expectations, the morbid curiosity, the whispered judgments. Liam stood a few feet away, a benevolent king observing his queen's programmed obedience. He was smiling, a picture of supportive husbandry. That was the first thing she would shatter. She leaned into the microphone, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor she had feared. "Good evening." She began, her gaze sweeping across the opulent hall. "My husband is right. There have been rumors, vicious, hurtful rumors, that have indeed caused my family a great deal of distress." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She saw Isabella preen a flicker of victory in her dark eyes. Liam's smile remained fixed, confident. And I am here tonight. Amelia continued, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the audience in closer. To set the record straight, I am here to offer an apology. A collective, almost imperceptible sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the room. The scandal would be contained. The social order would be restored. Liam gave her another small, approving nod. I owe a sincere apology to a woman who has been unfairly maligned in the press, a woman whose reputation has been dragged through the mud because of a private matter. Amelia's eyes found Isabella in the front row. She held her gaze a silent promise of what was to come. Isabella's smirk widened. This was her moment of public vindication. So I would like to say from the bottom of my heart, Amelia's voice began to swell with an emotion that no one could quite decipher. I am sorry. She let the words land. Then she took a small step back from the podium, as if her apology was complete. The audience began to applaud a polite, almost relieved sound. Liam started to move towards her, ready to wrap his arm around her and lead her off the stage, the perfect picture of a reconciled couple. But Amelia wasn't finished. She held up a hand, and the applause faltered, dying out into an uneasy silence. She stepped back to the microphone, a new, harder edge to her voice. I'm sorry. She repeated, her voice now ringing with a strength that stunned the room into absolute silence. I am sorry that I ever believed that a marriage contract was anything more than a business transaction to the man standing next to me. Liam froze his hand, hovering in mid-air. His smile vanished, replaced by a mask of confusion, then dawning horror. I'm sorry. Amelia continued, her voice rising with each word, a crescendo of righteous fury. That I was so naive as to think that the vows we took to have and to hold for better for worse, in sickness and in health, meant anything more than a clause in a shareholder agreement. The room was utterly still. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpeting. The air crackled with tension. This was not the speech anyone had been expecting. Amelia's eyes, blazing with a fire that seemed to scorch the very air, moved from Liam's stunned face to Isabella's, whose triumphant smirk had dissolved into a slack-jawed expression of disbelief. And most of all, Amelia's voice cracked, but with raw, unadulterated pain. Not weakness. I am sorry to my unborn child. I am sorry that your father values a business deal in Jakarta more than he values the dignity of your mother. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters in the back were scribbling furiously, their phones held aloft, recording every second of this spectacular implosion. My husband, Liam Sterling, she said, her voice now dripping with a cold, precise disdain, demanded that I come here tonight and apologize to his mistress, Isabella Rossi. She pointed a trembling finger at Isabella, who flinched as if struck. He threatened to take my child away from me, to leave me with nothing if I did not publicly humiliate myself for the sake of his business. She let the word hang in the air, laden with all its sordid implications. The narrative had been flipped, the script torched. She was not the hysterical, forgiving wife. She was the wronged woman, the scorned mother fighting back with the only weapon she had left, the truth. So yes, I will apologize, she said, her voice softening again, but this time with a chilling sincerity. Isabella, I am sorry. I am sorry for what you have become. A woman who seeks to build her happiness on the ruins of another's. A woman who mistakes a billionaire's provision for his respect. You are not a victor in this story. You are a casualty. Isabella's face, which had been pale with shock, was now flushed with a deep mottled red of pure fury. She looked to Liam for help, but he was frozen. his face a thunderous mask of rage and disbelief. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed on his own stage in front of his entire world. But Amelia hadn't delivered her final devastating blow. This was not just about public humiliation. This was about Julian's promise checkmate. "My husband is a brilliant businessman," Amelia said, turning her attention back to the stunned audience. "He builds empires, he acquires assets, and he is very, very good at hiding his liabilities. But sometimes even the most brilliant men get careless." She reached into the small, elegant clutch bag she was carrying. The audience leaned forward as one, a collective holding of breath. What could she possibly have in there? She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This," she said, her voice calm and clear, "is a copy of a wire transfer, a transfer of $10 million from a Sterling Industries subsidiary registered in the Cayman Islands to a privately owned shell corporation." Liam's eyes widened. He knew exactly what she was talking about. A flicker of panic, the first she had ever seen in him, crossed his face. "The Shell Corporation," Amelia continued, her voice as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, "is owned by a man named Lorenzo Rossi." A new wave of gasps, louder this time, swept through the room. Isabella's father. "Now, I'm not a businesswoman," Amelia said with a devastatingly effective, feigned innocence. "But it seems strange to me that a key investor would need to be paid $10 million before a major project is even announced. It almost looks like a bribe." The word exploded in the silent room. Bribe. It was a word that could topple empires, a word that could turn a Forbes cover story into a federal investigation. "And it gets worse," Amelia said, her voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, as if she were sharing a juicy piece of gossip. "Because my husband, in his haste to secure this deal, used a subsidiary that holds a significant number of shares in a company that has a major contract with the US government. And as I'm sure the federal regulators in the room will know, any company with government contracts is strictly forbidden from engaging in this kind of creative accounting." Chaos erupted. The reporters in the back were shouting questions. People were on their phones, no doubt, talking to their brokers, their lawyers. The string quartet had long since fallen silent. The Sterling Foundation Gala had just become the scene of a corporate crime. Liam finally jolted out of his paralysis, strode towards her, his face a mask of pure, murderous rage. "Amelia, you have no idea what you're doing," he hissed, grabbing her arm. She pulled her arm away, her eyes blazing with a newfound power. "Oh, I think I do," she said, her voice low, but carrying in the sudden lull in the chaos. "I'm saving my child from a world where money is more important than morality. I'm saving myself from a man who thinks a woman's soul is just another asset to be leveraged." And then for her final act, she turned back to the audience, to the flashing cameras, to the horrified, fascinated faces of the city's elite. "As of tonight," she announced, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell, "I am filing for divorce from Liam Sterling, and I will be petitioning for full ownership of my 50% share of the pre-nuptial assets as stipulated in our marriage agreement, in the event of proven infidelity and illegal business practices." She had not just burned the bridge. She had nuked it from orbit. She had taken his carefully constructed world of power and prestige, and with a few well-chosen words and a single sheet of paper, she had set it on fire. She placed the paper on the podium, a final damning piece of evidence for the world to see. Then, without a backward glance at the man she had once loved, the man who was now staring at the ruins of his empire, she turned and walked off the stage. The crowd parted for her, as if she were Moses parting the Red Sea. In the stunned, chaotic silence of the grand hall, The only sound was the confident, rhythmic click of her heels on the marble floor. She was no longer Mrs. Sterling, the billionaire wife. She was Amelia Cartwright, a woman who had been to hell and back, and had emerged not just a survivor, but a queen who had just checkmated the king. Amelia didn't stop walking until she was outside the cool night air, a welcome balm on her flushed cheeks. The pandemonium she had left behind in the grand hall was a distant roar, a storm she had unleashed but was now free from. Julian was waiting for her at the curb, a black town car idling its engine, a low, comforting hum. He opened the door for her, his face grim, but with a glimmer of triumph in his eyes. "Checkmate," he said softly, as she slid into the back seat. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling now that the adrenaline was beginning to fade. "It's just beginning," Julian replied, his expression serious as he got in beside her. "But you won the opening battle, and you won it spectacularly." As the car pulled away from the curb, a fresh wave of paparazzi, having gotten wind of the implosion inside, swarmed the entrance, their flashes like a barrage of fireworks. But Amelia was already gone, disappearing into the anonymity of the New York night. The fallout from what the tabloids were already calling the Gala of Wrath was immediate and catastrophic. By morning, Sterling Industries was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. News outlets replayed the footage of Amelia's speech relentlessly. Her calm, deliberate takedown of her billionaire husband was a global sensation. She was hailed as a feminist icon, a corporate whistleblower, a scorned wife who had risen from the ashes. For Liam Sterling, the world he had so meticulously built was crumbling around him. The stock price of Sterling Industries plummeted in pre-market trading. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, announced a formal investigation into the allegations of bribery and financial misconduct. Lorenzo Rossi, the linchpin of the Jakarta project, issued a furious denial from his villa in Lake Como. But the damage was done. The Jakarta deal was dead, and Lorenzo, implicated in a bribery scandal, was now a pariah. Liam, who had always been a master of controlling the narrative, was suddenly silenced. His PR team, overwhelmed by the crisis, could do little to stem the tide of negative press. He was trapped in his penthouse, a prisoner in his own ivory tower, the city lights that had once represented his kingdom, now illuminating his public execution. Isabella Rossi fared no better. She was excoriated in the press, branded as a home-wrecker and a co-conspirator. Her dreams of becoming the next Mrs. Sterling had vanished in a puff of public outrage. She fled to Europe, her reputation in tatters. Amelia, meanwhile, was tucked away in a discreet, high-security apartment that Julian had arranged. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The world outside was a maelstrom of her own making, but in her quiet sanctuary, there was peace. She spent her days reading, resting, and talking to the baby, who seemed to kick more and more, as if sensing his mother's newfound freedom. Julian handled the legal storm with the precision of a seasoned general. He filed for divorce, citing Liam's infidelity and the evidence of his illegal business dealings. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. In the event of such a breach, Amelia was entitled to a staggering 50% of their shared assets, a fortune that would make her one of the wealthiest women in the world. Liam, as expected, fought back with the ferocity of a cornered animal. He hired a team of the most ruthless lawyers in the city. They tried to paint Amelia as an emotionally unstable, vindictive woman, a gold digger who had orchestrated the entire scandal for financial gain. They tried to subpoena her medical records to find any hint of psychological distress that they could use to challenge her fitness as a mother. But Julian was always one step ahead. He had anticipated their every move. He presented the court with a mountain of evidence, sworn affidavits from staff who had witnessed Liam's affair, financial records, meticulously compiled by his forensic accountant, even a recording of Liam's threat to take her child away. The battle was brutal, fought not in the glare of the public eye, but in the sterile, high-stakes world of corporate law and divorce court. Weeks turned into months. The initial blaze of the scandal died down, replaced by the slow, grinding process of legal warfare. Amelia protected from the worst of it, by Julian focused on her health and her pregnancy. She started to build a new life for herself, reconnecting with old friends, taking walks in the park, even tentatively starting to think about her own future, a future that was not defined by a man. Then, just as it seemed that victory was within her grasp, Liam played a card that no one, not even Julian, had seen coming. One rainy afternoon, Julian arrived at Amelia's apartment, his face ashen. He was holding a legal document. "What is it?" Amelia asked, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "Liam's lawyers have filed a new motion," Julian said, his voice grim. "They are challenging the validity of the pre-nuptial agreement. But you said it was ironclad," Amelia said, her heart sinking. "It is," Julian said, "but they've found a loophole, a technicality, something I should have seen." He explained that the pre-enup had been signed in New York, but at the time Liam's primary residence was still officially listed as his family estate in Connecticut. His lawyers were arguing that Connecticut law should apply, and under a little-known Connecticut statute, a prenuptial agreement could be invalidated if one party could prove they had been unduly coerced or had not had adequate legal representation. "But I had a lawyer," Amelia protested. "Yes," Julian said. "A lawyer from a firm that, it turns out, has a long and very profitable relationship with Sterling Industries. They're going to argue that your lawyer was not acting in your best interest, that he was essentially a pawn of Liam's. They're going to say you were a young, impressionable woman in love, and that you were manipulated into signing away your rights." The audacity of it was breathtaking. Liam, the master manipulator, was now claiming to be the victim of his own machinations. He was trying to use his own deceit to his advantage. But the most devastating part of the motion was not the challenge to the pre-enup. It was the final clause. "He's also filed for sole custody of the child," Julian said, his voice barely a whisper. "He's claiming that your actions at the gala, your public and malicious attempt to destroy his reputation, prove that you are an unstable and unfit mother. He's arguing that you are a danger to the child." The room began to spin. The air was thick and heavy, and Amelia couldn't breathe. After everything she had fought for, after everything she had endured, he was still trying to take her baby away. The one thing she could not, would not lose. She had thought the battle was over, that she had won. But she had been wrong. This was not the end. It was just the end of the beginning. The king had been checkmated, but he had just flipped the board over and declared a whole new game. And in this new game, the prize was not money or power. It was her child. And as she looked at the legal document in Julian's hand, a new cold fear gripped her heart. This was a fight she could not afford to lose. And she had a horrifying feeling that Liam Sterling, with nothing left to lose, was about to become more dangerous than ever. The custody battle was a descent into a new kind of hell. The corporate warfare had been impersonal. a game of numbers and legal precedents. This was a war on Amelia's soul. Liam's lawyers led by a notoriously vicious attorney named Victoria Thorne. Marcus Thorne's wife, a calculated power move, unleashed a brutal character assassination campaign. They portrayed Amelia as a manipulative gold digger, a mentally fragile woman who had staged the gala incident in a fit of pique. They twisted her strength into aggression, her pain into hysteria. Every detail of her life was scrutinized, every private moment twisted into something ugly. They brought in paid experts who testified about the potential psychological damage to a child raised by a mother who had shown such a blatant disregard for social norms. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, designed to break her spirit and convince the court that she was the monster, not him. Amelia, now heavily pregnant, had to endure hours of depositions. Her every word recorded, her every emotion analyzed. Liam sat across from her, a mask of calm concern on his face, playing the role of the worried father. He was no longer the raging tyrant she had last seen at the gala. He was quiet, controlled, and infinitely more terrifying. Julian fought back with everything he had, but the tide was turning against them. The judge, an old-school conservative, seemed swayed by the narrative of the calm, powerful man as the emotional, pregnant woman. The challenge to the prenup was also gaining traction, threatening to leave Amelia financially vulnerable just when she needed resources the most. Despair began to creep back in a cold, familiar shadow. Had she made a mistake? Had she overplayed her hand? The nights were the worst. She would lie awake, her hands on her belly, a terrifying vision of Liam taking her baby from the hospital haunting her. It was during one of these dark, sleepless nights that a strange, fragmented memory surfaced. It was from the early days of their marriage, a conversation she had long forgotten. They were at the Connecticut estate, Liam's ancestral home. He was showing her his father's old study, a room panelled in dark wood and filled with leather-bound books. He had been talking about his father, a man he both revered and resented. My father believed in insurance policies. Liam had said, a strange, faraway look in his eyes, not just for business, for everything, for everyone. He had tapped a secret panel behind a bookshelf, revealing a small, hidden safe. He taught me to always have a contingency plan. The memory was hazy, insignificant at the time, but now it sparked something in Amelia's mind. A contingency plan. An insurance policy. What if Liam, a man who had learned at his father's knee, had one of his own? What if there was something in that, safe, something that could change everything? It was a wild, desperate, long shot. But she was out of options. She called Julian in the middle of the night. The Connecticut estate, she said, her voice urgent. Liam's father's study. There's a hidden safe. Julian was skeptical. Amelia, even if there is, we can't just break in. And what could possibly be in there that would help us? I don't know, she admitted. But it's the only thing I can think of. Liam is his father's son. He's arrogant. He believes he's untouchable. Maybe he got careless. Maybe he kept something he shouldn't have. Julian, sensing her desperation, agreed to look into it. He hired a discreet private investigator, a former FBI agent with a talent for finding things that didn't want to be found. 2 days later, the investigator called Julian with astonishing news. He had not only confirmed the existence of the safe, but he had also discovered that Liam had recently visited the estate just before filing the custody suit. He had been there for less than an hour, and the only room he had entered was his father's study. That was all the confirmation they needed. Julian filed an emergency motion, arguing that the safe could contain evidence relevant to the ongoing divorce and custody proceedings, specifically evidence pertaining to Liam's character and business practices. Victoria Thorne vehemently objected, calling it a desperate fishing expedition. But the judge, perhaps intrigued by the mystery or perhaps wanting to appear impartial, surprisingly granted the motion. The safe was to be opened in the presence of both legal teams. The day they drove out to the Connecticut estate was grey and overcast, the sky mirroring Amelia's mood. The sprawling stone mansion, which had once seemed so romantic, now felt like a Gothic tomb. They met Liam and his lawyers in the dusty, silent study. Liam's face was unreadable, but Amelia could sense a coiled tension in him. He was like a poker player, with a perfect hand, forced to show his cards. A court-appointed locksmith worked on the safe. The silence in the room was thick with anticipation. After what felt like an eternity, there was a soft click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, there were several stacks of documents and a small velvet bag. Julian reached in and took out the bag first. He emptied its contents onto the desk. It was a collection of exquisite antique diamond earrings. Amelia gasped. She recognized them immediately. They were a famous set that had belonged to a Brazilian socialite who had died in a mysterious boating accident 5 years earlier. The socialite had been a known mistress of Liam's father. Then Julian began to examine the documents. Most of them were old financial records belonging to Liam's father. But at the bottom of the pile there was a thin, leather-bound journal. Julian opened it. The handwriting was Liam's. It was a journal he had kept in his late 20s, a chronicle of his thoughts, his ambitions, his resentments, and his contingency plans. As Julian read aloud, the color drained from Liam's face. The journal was a bombshell. It detailed in Liam's own arrogant prose his deliberate, calculated plan to build his empire. It spoke of leveraging his father's illicit dealings, of blackmailing business rivals, of using women as pawns in his games of power. But the most damning entry was about his father's death. The official cause had been a heart attack. But in the journal, Liam described how he had confronted his father about his years of emotional abuse and his corrupt business practices. He wrote about a heated argument about his father clutching his chest. And then he wrote the words that would seal his fate. He begged me to call for help. I waited. I watched. It was the only way to be free. The only way to take what was rightfully mine. It was a necessary acquisition. The room was silent. Victoria Thorne looked at her client with horror. Liam was no longer a powerful billionaire. He was a monster, exposed by his own youthful hubris. He had not just admitted to bribery and infidelity. He had in his own hand confessed to patricide. The game was over. Not just the custody battle, not just the divorce. Everything. Victoria Thorne, a pragmatist above all else, immediately requested a private meeting with Julian. There were no more threats, no more blustering. There was only surrender. The terms were swift and absolute. Liam would withdraw the custody suit immediately and relinquish all parental rights. Amelia would have sole, uncontested custody of their child. The prenuptial agreement would be honored in full. In exchange for her silence about the journal, Liam would transfer an additional significant portion of his remaining assets to a trust for the child. It was not justice, not in the truest sense of the word. But it was a victory. It was freedom. It was safety for her and her baby. A week later, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Julian in honor of the man who had helped her reclaim her life. She never saw Liam Sterling again. He disappeared from public life, a disgraced recluse. The empire he had built on a foundation of lies and cruelty, crumbled into dust. Amelia, now one of the wealthiest women in the world, did not retreat into a life of quiet luxury. She became a philanthropist, a champion for women and children who had been victims of powerful, abusive men. She used her fortune and her story to fight for those who had no voice. She had been forced onto a stage, expected to deliver an apology. But in the end, she had rewritten the entire play. She had faced the dragon in his lair, and had not just survived, but had emerged with the kingdom. She had learned that true power was not in wealth or influence, but in the courage to speak the truth and the strength to fight for the future of those you love. Her scar was her strength, and her story a testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be silenced. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of moments, when all hope seems lost, the human spirit has an incredible capacity for resilience. She was pushed to the brink, her dignity stripped away, and her future threatened. But instead of breaking, she found a strength she never knew she had. She transformed her pain into power, her tears into a tidal wave of change that not only saved herself and her child, but also exposed a world of corruption. Her journey from a billionaire's captive to a queen in her own right shows us that the most powerful voice we have is our own. If Amelia's story of courage and rebellion moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will leave you speechless. Your support helps us continue to tell these important